Hello, and welcome to today's live SBA web conference. Please note that all participant lines will be muted for the duration of this event. You are welcome to submit written questions during the presentation, and Deborah Crumity will repeat the questions that come in for the benefit of the entire group. To send a note, please select the Participants menu at the top of your screen and opt to send note to all presenters. If you are logged in using the web-based application, please use the Notes function on the lower right-hand side of your screen and address your note to all moderators. In addition, to adjust the presentation view on your screen on the participant application, click on the Fit to Whiteboard icon located on the lower left-hand section of your screen. If you are connected via the web-based application, you can adjust the presentation view by simultaneously clicking the Control and the plus or minus button on your keyboard. If you require technical assistance, please send a note to the ATT CES operator or call our help desk at 888-796-6118. I would now like to formally begin today's conference and turn the call over to Jan Kaiser. Jan, please go ahead.
Thank you, Carla. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's First Wednesday webinar. Today's topic is contract bundling, and this has been a major initiative in the last few years along with consolidation, and we're very pleased to have this as a topic. The SBA First Wednesday Virtual Learning Series was developed by SBA's Office of Government Contracting in Area 4 to provide small business program training to federal buying activity personnel with an interest in procurement, both contracting and technical staff. The program audience has grown to include several hundred participants each month, with several thousand on the email invitation list, many outside of SBA's Area 4 footprint, to include SBA staff and our valuable resource partners like Procurement Technical Assistance Centers and Small Business Development Centers, as well as multiple agencies. This program series concentrates on getting SBA subject matter experts, and we hope these sessions provide information you can use in the performance of your job in the federal procurement process or in directly assisting small business concerns. My name is Jan Kaiser, and I work as a Procurement Center Representative, or PCR, in Chicago, Illinois. Additionally, with me today is Deborah Crumity, and she is a SBA PCR assigned to the Rock Island Arsenal in Rock Island, Illinois. And she'll be reading questions submitted during the program for our speaker to address towards the end of today's session. Let's discuss a little bit about how today's program works. We will address questions we've received during the program at the end of our speaker's presentation, as I said, and once again, if you're having technical problems and can hear my voice, but you can't log into the AT&T Connect participant application, which is the online portion of the webinar, call the AT&T Connect support desk at 1-888-796-6118. And if you didn't get that, the telephone numbers for the AT&T Connect support desk are on the email invitation for today's program and on slide 3 of the PowerPoint slide deck that accompanied the SBA email notifying you of today's training. Otherwise, just keep listening in and follow along with the PowerPoint that accompanied the invitation for today. This is why we will periodically announce the page numbers. So for SBA Small Business Program Training, if you'd like more SBA training, you can visit the SBA Learning Center at SBA's website at www.sba.gov. So the Association of Procurement Technical Assistance Centers hosts a website where they post today's program, which will be recorded. So they host the First Wednesday programming, and their website is provided here on slide 4. PTACs are a great resource, and partnering with a PTAC for an industry day, sharing source of thought notices and RFIs, or referring small business concerns to a PTAC are just a couple of reasons that PTACs are such a useful resource for acquisition personnel. This is a slide that will show you that our next month's topic is SBA's 8A Business Development Program, or 8A program. When we conducted a survey earlier this year, we received several suggested topics regarding this particular subject. And as usual, we'll be accepting questions at the end of that program. So be thinking about what you would like to ask or know about for the AA Business Development Program next month on August 2nd. Just a note that we'll be sending the slides out for next month in the week of July 24th, which will be a little bit later than usual, but the slides will be coming out with the invitation for the August 2nd session. Please don't hesitate to suggest the topic for inclusion in our program as we're putting the FY18 programs together currently. We're thinking about that. So one more thing before we get on to our topic for today. Everybody needs to know about today's PowerPoint containing the certificate that you're going to download once you fill in your name. And so today's program is worth one continuous learning point. This slide 7 is the certificate for today, where you're going to insert your name in that red highlighted area, and you print that off yourself and upload that into your system or show it to whoever it is that you need to show the proof of your training in order to receive your CLP. SBA doesn't track those CLPs. We don't upload into your system. This is a self-serve program. So we're going to begin today's program on slide 9 with the speaker directing me to change the page when Mike's ready. There may be some delay in the slide changes on your screen. This is just one of those remote location or webinar issues. Mr. Mike McLaughlin is the Assistant Director of the Office of Policy and Research at the SBA. I heard Mike speak on a panel at the DoD Small Business Training Week, and the room was packed. So, Mike, we're pleased that you could get us into your schedule and meet with us today. I'll turn the program over to you.
Thanks, Jan, and thank you for inviting me to participate today. As Jan mentioned, this was a topic at the DoD SBA conference in early April, and I haven't really changed the slides a lot since then, and I have retained a number of scenarios that DoD developed for the use of their personnel, which appear near the end of the presentation. I have added a few slides at the very end. I'm hoping we have a chance to get to those, where I enumerate some of the PCR responsibilities, which might provide opportunities for us to more favorably influence the introduction of contract bundling to our universe. So with that said, let's go on to the second slide, please. This is generally what the discussion topics are going to be about. Provide a listing of some general references on the topics, some definitions. I want to talk about pre-award acquisition requirements, because most of this is addressed in the FAR as acquisition planning. We'll also take a look at some post-award requirements, including our requirement to provide a congressional report on this subject area. And then what follows are the scenarios, recommended best practices, and as I mentioned, some select PCR responsibilities that give you some authorities in this area. Next slide, please.
Slide 10.
All right. Slide 10. Thank you for bringing me up to speed on the numbers. Those are the references that I mentioned. They're there for your future reference if you want it in more detail. And if we can go to slide 11. What I want to talk about here is have some pie. The universe of consolidation is a rather broad universe, and it actually would, in some cases, not prohibit small businesses from participating or making it difficult for them to participate. Bundling is just a small piece, but bundling is always consolidation, but not all consolidation is bundling. So if we go on to the next slide, this is the definition of consolidation. When you solicit a single contract, including multiple award contracts, to satisfy two or more requirements for supplies or services that are valued in excess of $2 million, that have been provided to or performed for the agency under two or more separate contracts that were lower in cost than the contract for which offers were solicited, or to satisfy the requirements of a federal agency for construction projects to be performed at two or more discrete sites. So when we talk about the second qualifier there, it's mentioning the number of sites, not necessarily a dollar value. If we go on to slide number 13, we talk about bundling. And bundling is when you have two or more requirements for supplies or services previously provided or performed by a small business under separate, smaller contracts into a solicitation for a single contract, again including multiple award contracts, that is likely to be unsuitable. That's the term. It's likely to be unsuitable for award to a small business concern. And the reason that it's couched in that term is this discussion is really taking place during the acquisition planning. So you don't know if it's going to be unsuitable, but it's likely to be unsuitable for award to a small business concern. If we go on to slide 14, there are thresholds that are identified, and this is significant for our discussion today. It's considered substantial bundling if it's $2.5 million or more. That's for most agencies. There's slightly higher levels for DOD, NASA, GSA, and Department of Energy. For DOD, it's considered substantial bundling if it's estimated to be $8 million or more. For NASA, GSA, and the Department of Energy, the threshold is $6 million or more. We go on to slide number 15. This is a FAR reference. So during the acquisition planning phase, the agency head is responsible for ensuring that the acquisition planners, to the maximum extent practicable, was going to structure contract requirements to facilitate competition by and among small business concerns, and will avoid unnecessary and unjustified consolidation or bundling. So the agency head has that responsibility, and to execute that responsibility, I would imagine that they have to have some local procedures on how to go about doing that. We go on to slide number 16 for those following along at home. FAR 7104D, the planner coordinates acquisition plan strategy with a small business specialist for acquisitions meeting the threshold for substantial bundling. So again, we're talking about the $8 million, the $6 million, and the $2.5 million threshold. The small business specialist notifies the agency office of, the name varies, but it's the small disadvantaged business utilization if bundling is necessary or unjustified, is unnecessary or unjustified, or the bundled or consolidated requirement is not identified as such. So if that's a stumble-on type requirement, but if the small business specialist locally determines it's not, they're going to notify the OSTABU. And the OSTABU should be reaching out to the SBA representative if they're unable to get this changed. I would imagine that they would want to do that just as a courtesy as well. FAR 7105B, the acquisition plan must consider the impact of consolidation and bundling for the acquisition, and if bundled, it must identify incumbent contractors and contractors affected. We go on to slide number 17. This FAR reference, 107-2A, the agency shall not consolidate contract requirements with an estimated value exceeding $2 million unless the agency, and it elaborates on the resources, but it's on the requirements, market research. They should be identifying alternatives to that strategy. So they have to make a written determination. That's important because it's documentation, and our PCRs have access to contract documentation. So they must make a written determination signed by the senior procurement executive and coordinated with by the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization that the consolidation is necessary and justified. So they must identify any negative impact on small business concerns, and they must include steps to include small business concerns in their acquisition. We go on to slide number 18. 107-2B, the market research, and this elaborates on what it must demonstrate. It needs to identify the benefits of the acquisition strategy, and they must substantially exceed the benefits of each of the possible alternative contracting approaches. And generally, that's going to be 10% or more. And there's going to be some more detail provided, but in one case, if it's over 94 million, it's got to be 9.4 million or 5%, whichever is greater. So there's a substantial threshold for identifying substantial benefits. 107-2C. I should mention that my office sits next to the Amtrak train tracks, so you're going to hear those horns in the background. But this is a training event, so I request that you put up with it a little bit. So 107-2C, the benefits can include cost savings or price reductions, and regardless of whether or not it's quantifiable in dollar amounts, they need to identify this in their justification. The benefits can include quality improvements, such as savings of time, or enhanced performance or efficiency, reductions in acquisition cycle times, better terms and conditions, or any other benefit. They do need to quantify this. If we can go to slide number 19. In FAR 7107-2D, the quantifiable benefits that individually or combined lead to benefits equivalent to 10% savings if the award value is 94 million or less, and if the award value is greater than 94 million, either 9.4 million or 5% of the award value, whichever is greater. If you have non-quantifiable benefits, they must be identified and quantified to the extent feasible. Administrative cost savings alone are considered to be substantial alone if they are at least 10% of the award value. We can go on. I have to unlock my screen. Bear with me for a moment. If we go on to thank you very much. FAR 7107-3A, the market research must demonstrate that the agency would obtain measurably substantial benefits as compared to meeting its agency requirements through separate smaller contracts or orders. So that's a level of documentation. It must clearly, it can't just like say probably, it needs to demonstrate that. And FAR 7107-3D, they have to quantify the specific benefits through the market research and other techniques. And in 107-3C, it elaborates again that the cost savings, price reductions can be quality improvements, reduction in acquisition cycle times, better terms or conditions, or whatever. If we go to slide number 21, 7107-3D, it has to be quantifiable, measurable, substantial benefits that individually or combined lead to benefits equivalent to, and this is, consolidation and bundling, this is the same standard, 10% or the greater of 9.4 million or 5% of the award value, whichever is greater. And if they're claiming administrative savings, it has to be they have to be able to quantify that, and it has to be at least 10%. We go to slide number 22. 7107-4B, when the strategy involves substantial bundling, and we've identified the threshold for substantial bundling as 2.5 million, 6 million, or 8 million, depending on the activity. The acquisition strategy must additionally identify the specific benefits to be derived from the bundling. They have to include an assessment of the specific impediments to participation by small businesses, and they have to specify actions designed to maximize small business participation as contractors, including provisions that encourage small business teaming. They must specify, if I can, slide 23, specify actions designed to maximize small business participation as subcontractors at any tier under the contractor order. They have to include a specific determination that the anticipated benefits of the proposed bundled contractor order justify its use, and identify alternative strategies to reduce or minimize the scope of the bundling and the rationale for not choosing those alternatives identified. We go on to slide number 24. I put together a quick matrix, and I'm leaning forward on one of the initial notifications to the SBA PCR, because I believe that PCR can request that, and I would encourage that that be done. But I'm going to speak to this in some more detail. But this identifies some of the players involved here. You have the incumbent small business concern is supposed to receive notification 30 days prior to a solicitation going out that contains bundling and impacts that small business incumbent contractor. The SBA PCR, you should be engaging. You should have that in your agreement with the procurement activity, that since the notification to the incumbent small business concern contains your contact information or your office's contact information, that you would like to be at least copied. And that's where I put that 30-day notification on the initial bundling. It doesn't appear elsewhere for the initial bundling notification, but you're getting it indirectly through the incumbent small business, so it would be quicker if you were included as a CC in the initial notification to the small business. And for a follow-on requirement, the SBA PCR is formally provided with notification 30 days prior to the solicitation going out. The procurement activity, if they're contemplating bundling, they need to be able to post that on FBO, and they need to annually, if they're going to continue to do this, they need to list and rationale 30 days. They need to post that 30 days within the period that they've accomplished the verification and validation of the requirement. And the small business specialist needs to be notified during the planning phase when the threshold for substantial bundling have been met. We could go on to the next slide. On FAR 7107-5A, the notification is provided to affected incumbent small business concerned at least 30 days before the release of the solicitation. And they're going to provide to the small business concerned the name and POC information of the applicable SBA PCR or the SBA area office of government contracting. And that's where I feel that the PCRs should say, hey, don't just give my name to the small business. Copy me on the message that you're sending to the small business, so that you have the maximum opportunity to engage and influence the outcome. And they do need to document this. This is part of the formal contract file documentation, and that's available to the PCR. So if you haven't been contacted and you have not, excuse me, if you haven't been contacted and you're unaware of this, you should be able to go to that contract file and see if that notification responsibility was accomplished. We could go to slide number 26. 7107-5B, the notification is provided to the public. The agency has to publish it on its website with its rationale, for which the agency solicited offers or issued an award, and within 30 days of the agency's certification of contract data in FPDS, and they need to publish that. The agency is encouraged to provide notification of the rationale, any bundle requirement to the government point of entry prior to issuance of the solicitation. So this is an area where Congress really wants to discourage bundling, and it wants a lot of public visibility of this. We go to slide number 27. FAR 7, 107-5C, the notification is provided to SBA for follow-on or bundled or consolidated requirements, and the CO has to notify the PCR within 30 days before the release of the solicitation. They have to identify in there all of the things we've spoke of earlier, the amount of savings and benefits achieved under prior consolidation or bundling. So if they entered into the initial bundled contract and said they're going to save $9.4 million a year, they should be able to articulate that with the follow-on notification to see if they're on track for achieving that, and whether the savings and benefits will continue to be realized if the contract remains consolidated or bundled. Well, if you're in that conversation and they can't identify savings and benefits, it's going to be difficult for them to articulate whether or not they're going to be realized if it remains consolidated or bundled. So I think that's a very good time to decide whether or not it's in the government's best interest to continue, and whether such savings and benefits would be greater if the procurement requirements were divided into separate solicitations suitable for award to small business concerns, and whether any requirements have been added or deleted from the consolidated or bundled requirement. We could go to slide, I think it's 20, is it 28? 28. Excuse me. FAR 7107-5D, the agency must publish government-wide policy regarding contract bundling, including the solicitation of teaming and joint ventures on the agency's website. So that should be available for your review as well. FAR 7107-6, in solicitations for multiple award contracts above the substantial bundling threshold of the agency, the CO must insert the FAR clause 52207-6, which is solicitation of offers from small business concerns and small business teaming arrangements or joint ventures. And one of the nuances of joint ventures, if small business concerns enter into joint ventures with other small business concerns for the purpose of proposing on a bundled contract, that the rules of affiliation are suspended. It does not impact their eligibility to compete for other work. So that's a significant accommodation there. We could go to slide number 29. These are my concerns. I've been doing reports for FY 14, 15, and 16. There seems to be a focus on the part of the agencies on the initial justification for substantial bundling. And again, for Department of Defense, that was $8 million. For most agencies, it's $2.5 million, and NASA, GSA, and Department of Energy are $6 million. So there's a review process in place as part of the acquisition planning process, and that seems to be where a substantial amount of the attention is focused. Not so much on the follow-on contract effort. So that's something that I would encourage people to engage with the procurement activities on, to see if they're actually continuing to monitor this, if they're exercising options after having determined that it's still in the government's best interest, and they're able to quantify actual savings rather than estimated savings. Another concern I have is the visibility of the contract file documentation to support continued bundling. PCRs and others have access to that specific contract file documentation. If they ask to see it, they should be provided with that. If it doesn't exist, I think that actually is something that could be covered in the briefing to the agency head or part of a continuing dialogue with procurement officials about, they're not really doing the full job if they're only if all activities and determinations and levels of review end with the initial award. There also seems to be a lack of definition for cost savings realized by bundling the contract requirements over the life of the contract, and there's a lack of definition for projections of continued cost savings. When I ask the questions, it seems to be a challenge to identify continued cost savings. We can go to the next slide, slide number 30. One of the things that's of concern is also compliance with the contracting agency's small business subcontracting plan. The total dollar value awarded to small business concerns of subcontractors versus their prior status as prime contractors. So if they can't compete as prime contractors, it would be good to know that they're still receiving some work as as subcontractors, as small businesses, and that helps mitigate the impact to the small business community. So I'm concerned about whether or not that plan is being adhered to. Also, the impact of bundling contracts on small business concerns that are unable to compete as primes and industries for the small business concerns. If we could go to slide number 31. A trend. From the data that is being provided by the agencies, there are only 12 bundled contracts being reported in all of FY16. I don't know if that's a good number, but by statute we accept the information that's provided by the procurement activities. If there's an improvement needed in improving the accuracy of that, I solicit your help in helping to identify those and have them reported in FPDS. We are looking at an improved ability within FPDS. We've had a development that took place earlier this year in February where the reporting for consolidated and bundling of contracts was limited to DoD, and it had a rather an arcane number of characteristics that DoD was trying to collect for reasons other than consolidation and bundling. Now it's very explicit. It's been expanded to all agencies to require them to report consolidated and bundling awards, and there's some very specific criteria to identify whether it's consolidated or bundled. And I've made reference to the link there. If you're interested in the specific changes, how it's reported in FPDS, and the relevant FAR case that caused the change to take place in FPDS-NG. We can go to slide number 32. There are increased authorities for the OSTABUs, and there's a FAR case moving forward at this time, 2017-008, and these actually implement statute. These are the three latest responsibilities that have been assigned to the Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization. They have to conduct annual reviews of consolidated bundled documentation. So if you become engaged in this area yourself and you see a problem with that, you have an opportunity to raise that to the attention of the OSTABUs, who are so themselves responsible for conducting annual reviews. There is a requirement for increased collaboration with procurement center representatives, and there's a requirement for the OSTBUs to assign small business technical advisors to pair and assist PCRs where they're assigned. And these have to be full-time, qualified, trained individuals that are familiar with the requirements. You can go to slide number 33. There's an annual assessment reporting to the agency head and SBA. So the annual assessment reporting identifies that there's been a fair share of opportunities, that the adequacy of consolidated bundled documentation and justification is sufficient, and that agencies have taken mitigating actions. So these are positive trends in requirements and documentation. Go to slide number 34. There is a requirement for SBA to collect the information. That's where the requirement appears. And it requires us to report on contract bundling. And the first element that we report is the number of displaced small business concerns by NAICS code. We go to slide number 35. A description of the activities with respect to previously bundled contracts during the preceding year, the number and total dollar value, the justification, the cost savings realized, and projections for continued cost savings. We can go to slide number 36. Compliance with whether or not for these bundled contracts, there is compliance with the contract agency's small business subcontracting plan, including the total dollar value awarded to small business concerns as subcontractors and the total dollar value previously awarded to the small business concerns as prime contractors, and the impact of bundling contract requirements on small business concerns that were unable to compete as prime contractors and industries of those small business concerns. Slide number 37. All right, these are actually some examples. I'll provide those for your review. These were provided by DoD. I don't disagree with the examples. We could go to the next slide. In this scenario, they talk about 3 small businesses, contract values of $500K, $400K, and $1 million. Is this consolidation or bundling as defined by the Small Business Act? Next slide. In this scenario, they correctly conclude that it's not, because it doesn't meet the $2 million threshold. All right, and they draw a conclusion that it doesn't make it unsuitable for small business, probably because of the dollar value that's involved. All right, next slide, please. Scenario 2. You have a consolidation of requirements. If you read the text there, no small businesses submitted a capability statement. It was awarded to a single large business. And does this constitute consolidation or bundling? Go to the next slide. And they acknowledge that this constitutes bundling, and they actually provide a reference there for a case, Sigmatech Incorporated. Next slide, please. This is a checklist that DoD uses that you may want to share this. Next slide, please. Again, a checklist that DoD provides to their people. Next slide, please. We can take questions here, but I'd like to skip ahead a little bit. I provided some additional charts at the back end here. Go one more slide.
I'm sorry, I don't have that.
Okay, I'm sorry. These are some notes I made for myself. I'll review them really quickly. The procurement center representative is authorized to review any bundled or consolidated solicitation or contract. They have access to procurement records and other data of the procurement center that are commensurate with the level of such clearance. So they should be able to take a look at the documentation that's in the files. So if you're looking at bundled and consolidated requirements and you're not seeing the documentation about the savings, you're not seeing the determination that why is it worthwhile to continue, that's something that that you can make an issue of. A PCR is authorized to review any bundled or consolidated solicitation or contract, both for the initial review and continuing reviews for follow-on requirements. And that's something that you can actually assert or make explicit in your agreement with the procurement activity. And because you have access to the procurement records, this is something that you can leverage to make sure that you receive the initial notification, a copy of the initial notification to an incumbent small business concern. You should be able to see the rationale, whether the rationale for bundling is formally published. You can look for documented actual cost savings and benefits for the contract that provides a justification for continuing to do so. You can take a look at whether or not the mitigating efforts for subcontracting, the agency's requirement for the subcontracting plan, whether or not they've actually, the vendor has done that. You can take a look at whether or not the contract has a requirement for liquidated damages for noncompliance with the subcontracting plan. And you can get notice 30 days prior to a follow-on requirement for actual and continued savings, what alternatives were considered, and what changes were made to the requirement. Also, another opportunity is the annual briefing and report. You can take this information and you can present this to the head of the procurement center. So those are my thoughts on the topic. If there are any questions or comments, I'm available to address those.
Mike, this is Deborah. Apparently your presentation was awesome. The only question that we have are questions regarding a copy of the presentation, and I think Jan can provide insight on that. So no other questions regarding the presentation itself.
Okay. Now, I did provide a link, excuse me, the URL to the OPPL webpage, and that will contain copies of the last 3 years' reports to Congress on bundling. So if people want to go in there and take a look at what has been acknowledged to be bundling, there's only 12 contracts being reported currently for bundling. So if they happen to be a contract at your activity, that may be something you want to access.
So actually, we have a question that just came in. The question is, if an agency have one solicitation for multiple items on one, but there could result in a separate award for each item, does that mean it's bundled? I didn't quite understand the question.
Well, I think the key thing we want to take a look at is no matter how they're shaped, in their acquisition planning, they're going to meet, the activity will meet some approach to do their acquisition planning. And it's bundled if small business concerns that previously were able to participate are now unable to. And what are the things that make them unable to participate? If they had a requirement for painting buildings on one military base, and they had the same requirement on 84 military bases, and now they want the businesses that respond have to be able to paint all 84 bases. That might be difficult, right? So you have to take a look at what impediments are being done. If they're saying that you have to have an office locally, that you have to be located within 25 miles of all of the work sites, that if it requires the purchase of equipment that's for some requirements that they didn't have to have before, but now they've combined the requirements and you have to have equipment that you can't afford. That's an impediment for the small business. You have to take a look at at how it's been structured and why is it now unsuitable, where before small businesses were able to perform on that requirement. Now it's been combined with other requirements in a way that a small business can't responsibly bid to do it.
Okay, thank you, Mike. We
Okay.
have another question. You mentioned in your briefing OPTL. What is that?
Okay, that's my parent office. It's the Office of Policy, Planning, and Liaison. I'm the assistant director for OPTL. I'm one of two assistant directors. I am also the director for the Office of Policy and Research. And what we do is we publish the rules that go into the Federal Register, and then we coordinate those changes with the FAR Council. We also set the goals for prime and subcontract awards by the 24 CFO agencies, and we monitor those the achievement of those goals. That's what we do.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, can you clarify the slide that says $2 million threshold does not apply for construction? And also, can you clarify what the definition of the street site as it applies to jump-based sites?
Well, the definition of bundling basically said it's got to exceed $2 million, or that it was a requirement that was at more than one site. So if it's two or more sites, and now you've consolidated the requirement. And the example I gave was you needed to paint the barracks at one military base, and now they consolidate that requirement, and now it's 84 military bases around the country. So the individual small businesses that could work on one site might be challenged. They can't do it at all 84 sites. Does that help?
I believe so. We don't have a follow-on question at this time.
Yeah, the way it's written, it doesn't state a threshold for the construction. But I would imagine a construction project that is going to be significant at any. If someone is going to be consolidated, it's going to be significant dollar value.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions?
Deborah, I just sent you one to presenters only.
Okay. The question is, well, I don't see the question.
Yeah, well, I think the question is to clarify the definition of a discrete site as it applies to joint base sites. Well, one of the things that's happened through base realignment is, I think in our own area here we've had joint base. Andrews is now combined with another base. So each base was doing its own procurement at one point in time, and then through BRAC or other action, they've combined the bases, and very often they'll combine the procurement offices. So it doesn't change the fact that the sites, there might have been two sites before, and now they want to have it, 2 sites with 2 contracts, they want to have 2 sites with 1 contract. Well, that meets the definition of consolidation, and it possibly meets the definition of bundling, depending on the impact of small businesses. So for our purposes, we're not going to deal with the definition of joint base, discrete. We're just taking a look at what the impacts are to small business. And I think that's the key approach here.
Okay, Mike, I do have another question. The end part of your briefing where you didn't have presentation slides, will you be able to send those out?
Yeah, there were just some notes I made for myself, but I will send those to Jan, and she can distribute those.
Okay. The next question: from which department were the 12 reported bundle contracts? Were these all DoD?
The majority of those were DoD. GSA reported 2 requirements, both of which at the time that they reported were under protest. And the work that was being accomplished, only one of them actually had dollars against it in FY16, and the dollars that were against it were actually DoD dollars. So I think it was an Air Force requirement. So almost across the board, all of the actual dollars that were obligated in FY16, both for initial and follow-on contracts, were with the Department of Defense. Now, I will share with you that there is a change that's about to be published to the FAR. At one point in time, we did not include overseas procurements in the small business goaling. That changed in FY16, so we've included those dollars. But there still was a provision of the FAR that was a legacy of that practice. There was a provision in there that said that bundling doesn't apply overseas, and I wasn't here when that was put into the FAR, but it was, I guess we were indifferent to it because we didn't consider that in our small business goaling. But since we've started to include overseas contracting in our small business goaling and base, we've revisited that point, and the Civilian Agency Council and the FAR Council have agreed. We haven't published it yet, but they have agreed to eliminate that exemption. So where the FAR previously excluded overseas contracts from the bundling definition, that's going to end very shortly. So I believe we have some contracts that are overseas. I think USAID and I think the Department of Agriculture have some contracts overseas that they're not reporting because they don't meet the definition as adjusted by the FAR. So we might see some I would say maybe 3 to 6 additions to this once that is published in the FAR.
Thank you, Mike. I have another question. Why is it that small businesses are more likely to be impacted by bundling, yet the substantial bundling, the DoD threshold of $8 million, requiring coordination with the OSDBU and OSBP, is higher than that applicable to consolidation, DoD $2 million?
Well, here's the thing. It's possible that I'm trying to look over the shoulder of Congress on this one, but they're supposed to look at ways to avoid the practice of bundling, period. That they're supposed to be doing that and looking for ways to mitigate the impact of that. So there's an additional level of review that comes into play at $2.5 million, at $6 million, and $8 million, depending on the activity, where it's gotten to the point now where it's catching people's attention, and they're saying, at this point, we trust that you're making every effort to discourage this practice. But now that we're talking somewhat serious dollars, at this point we want to have a formal review process in place. And that's where those requirements kick in. So it's an additional level of engagement and review that takes place when it becomes what they call substantial bundling. Does that help?
I believe so. I don't have a follow-on to that question. But I do have another question for you.
All right.
The next question is, must award construction IDIQ contracts for a given geographic area where 2 or more projects requirements may occur during the term of the contract, but where the base IDIQ is awarded at $0, considered a consolidated requirement under the definition of discrete site?
Well, the definition of consolidated and bundled, I think, is consistent. If they're issuing an IDIQ contract or BPA or whatever, they're not obligating any dollars with the initial award. Once they start making the awards, and there are different ways of doing that, and there are ways that allow for small business participation. When they put that contract when they're doing the planning for that contract, they have to have an estimated dollar value. They actually there's a requirement, a formal requirement, for them to have a ceiling price on that contract. So if they've got a multiple award contract, they have to be able to say that the ceiling on this contract is $500 million. Once they reach that ceiling, they're generally allowed to increase it by maybe as much as 10 or 20%, depending on the activity and the levels of review. But there's an estimated value for that contract. So if the issue is what's the dollar value, it really has nothing to do with the fact that the original IDIQ came out as $0. Very often it's $0. The dollar value comes with the actual orders that are placed against it. So the consolidated requirement has more to do with the levels of participation that took place previously, whether or not there was more than one contract being used previously. Does that help?
I believe so. Thank you, Mike. I'm checking to see if we have any additional questions. And I don't see any at this time. Are there any more questions?
I don't see any other questions either. But I think the questions that have been asked have been some really good ones. I like the construction and the discrete site. That always comes up. And this last question about the IDIQs at $0. You're right, Mike. There's going to be some concerns that were identified when the IDIQ was initially developed. And those concerns that are currently performing that work might be considered incumbents. So that's an interesting question that they asked in that last scenario as well. And I appreciate the scenarios that you provided in your presentation. So with that, I think we're done for today. Mike, I can't thank you enough. This has been a super hot topic, and I'm so glad you could fit us into your calendar. And remember, everyone, next month is the first Wednesday program is going to be on August 2nd. It's going to be about the 8A Business Development Program, and that will be our last program for fiscal year 2017. And it's been a joy working with you all today and so far this fiscal year. Carla?
So thank you all for joining today's conference. This session has now concluded, and you may disconnect.